Welcome back, traders and investors, to Benzinga's pre-market prep, brought to you by MarketFi. I'm your co-host Joel Alconin, and I have Cate Long on the line. She's a financial blogger and founder of Puerto Rico Clearinghouse. Cate, how you doing this morning?
Good, Joel. How are you? Good to be here.
Good. Glad to have you back. Well, before we delve into the elections here, just would like to get your comments. The bankruptcy proceeding in Detroit, as expected, in your opinion.
Yes, pretty much. The Jones Day, the attorney for Detroit, pretty much laid this out months ago, and they've moved all the pieces along. There's a lot of pieces here, and it looks like the judge will sign off on this pretty quickly, and then Detroit can, get to the business of implementing their new financial structure. So,
Yeah, and
great day for Detroit.
a great day for Detroit. And so you're confident the way that it was handled by the attorneys and the courts, that you're not going to have like a big influx of other municipalities or cities pulling the same thing.
It really varies. There's some cities in a lot of distress. I mean, we still have Scranton, and I think we mentioned this before in Pennsylvania, but the state of Pennsylvania doesn't allow cities to go into bankruptcy without, the state legislature allowing them to. So, it varies. Every city has to kind of look at their own condition, but there could be more bankruptcies because there are some distressed cities, but generally, cities have done a reasonable job of paring their expenses and trying to get revenues up. So Detroit will not open a floodgate of municipal
Okay,
bankruptcy.
that's
No.
good. That's good to hear. All right, so we're about a week removed here from the midterm elections. So let's just talk about some of the implications from the elections, and let's go to the state of Illinois, which we discussed their
Mm.
problems in the past, and they elected a Republican governor.
Right. Is that a shock or what? um, I don't know. I mean, Mr. Rauer's got a big job ahead of him. He spent his own funds, a lot of it, to get elected, and he now has to work with the Democratic legislature to get the state, I guess, in better fiscal condition. So he's got a bunch of big hurdles ahead of him, I think.
And do you think that legislature is gonna be cooperative here, or do you think they're just gonna stonewall him?
There's some entrenched politicians, Mike Madigan, who leads the House. He's a longtime, party functionary in Illinois, and, has a lot of support from the unions, has a lot of vested interest. I think he'll be a real adversary to the governor. It may be that they find some way to horse trade and, you know, make sure that all the parties are satisfied here as they face, reducing their expenses. But it's hard. I mean, it's really hard. Usually when you're spending too much, somebody has to, get less. And who's that going to be? Madigan's people, the Democratic people, the unions, the employees, or Rauer's people, or basically the taxpayers. So, it'll be quite a show here, I think, in the next year in Illinois.
Yeah, I mean they have definitely some structural issues. They have I guess the first thing of order would be keeping the current tax base in place, and a lot of unpaid bills. Could you just talk about the structural issues in Illinois?
Right, exactly. I mean, they have this income tax increase that's sunsetting at the end of the year, and the legislature has to vote either to extend it or to reduce expenses, which means cuts. And Illinois is known, as a state with the most unpaid bills too. I think they're running around $6 billion now of unpaid bills that they owe to vendors, and they kind of use that as a slush fund to, make sure they have enough cash. But it's an extremely hard way to operate, and some of these sort of big financial issues need to get addressed in the medium term and the longer term.
And some of the problems for municipalities and also state like Illinois is just less funding coming out of D.C. here for some really important projects. And are they going to be able to overcome the lack of funding or less funding coming from the federal government?
Right. The Congress has not increased the fuel tax in 20 plus years. So the funding at the federal level for states roads and bridges has just really just, dwindled more and more and more. So states are trying to make up that funding gap in local communities through either raising their own gas taxes or committing more general funds to roads. But we're going to see more of that, I think. I think the commitment on the part of especially now that the Congress has gone Republican, there's just not a general interest, I think, on the part of Republicans to fund things from the federal level. And, even I'll go further and say we could start seeing some social programs being block granted to the states, which is what the Republicans have always wanted. That could be in the next 2 years, but that would be a substantial change for the country too.
Okay, let's talk about the implications from the elections in a couple other states. Kansas, which is had some weaker growth. What any changes in the elections in Kansas that may help that state recover a little bit faster?
No, the Kansas reelected their Governor Brownback by about 50%, very thin margin, and he's been the sort of national leader in trying to cut taxes with the philosophical belief that that'll spur growth. And it's, I guess voters there feel they would like to, give him a little bit more time, 4 more years to do that, but really, the data is not showing that cutting taxes on high-income earners and small business owners is improving growth. They're sort of lagging the states that surround them and stuff. But it's an interesting experiment. A lot of people are watching it. The rating agencies have downgraded the debt of Kansas just because, there seems to be less structural balance there because of these reduced revenues, less taxes. And we'll see. It's an interesting experiment, and Kansas is a small state. It's only about 3 million people in Kansas, so it'll be interesting to see if it's a real laboratory for the nation or not.
Okay, and also a term that was new to me, lock boxes for state governments. Was that passed anywhere? And to explain to our listeners what it is.
Right. So often when funds are collected for a specific purpose, let's just say a gas tax, often they just flow it they get put in the general fund so they can get spent on anything. And what we had in this past election was 2 states, Wisconsin and Maryland, that decided to take funds collected, gas taxes, and dedicate them specifically to roads. This is what the voters wanted. And I think it's an interesting approach. I think we'll see more of that where taxes collected for specific purposes are legally segregated and sort of kept out of the hands of the legislature to be used for other things. It's just, again, I think more conservatism overall we're seeing in public spending. It's a really interesting example of it.
Okay, and in Louisiana, infrastructure bank is something that was up for voting. How did that go?
Voters in Louisiana decided they didn't want an infrastructure bank. I think they just were not really well prepared to understand what it was. But the idea is that the state legislature would create like a bank, basically like a state bank, and put the capital in to allow that bank to make loans to state and local agencies in Louisiana to build roads and bridges. I think it's a good idea. You have Jindal, another Republican governor down there that was pushing the idea. I just don't think they prepared the voters well enough to understand what the purpose of that was. So they voted it down. I think over 65% voted it down.
Okay, and finally, I was listening to your comments on Texas, and they diversified away from the oil and gas royalties. From the, licking their wounds from the '80s run up, and then the total collapse. And you made a comment that they had pegged the state government or the oil industry had pegged the average price for crude oil to be at $80, and they were basing their royalties and revenues on that. And they did that quite some time ago. I find that to be
Right.
a great prediction.
Yeah, well, so, states that have been around the oil business for a long time, like Texas and Oklahoma and Alaska, they've seen these prices go up and down. And when they rely on the revenues, they just take the smart approach and lowball it. So yeah, the folks in Texas, the budget officials, last year decided to peg 2015 oil revenues at $80 a barrel, and they get royalties that flow off that go into their rainy day fund, and a little bit goes into the general fund. About 5% is general fund is funded from royalties. But you just have experience over a long period of time with oil revenues, and they go up and down, they boom and they bust, and so they just take a more conservative approach to
Yeah,
playing for it.
and it's paying off for them. Cate Long on the line, financial blogger and founder of Puerto Rico Clearinghouse. Kate, before we let you go, we got to get your comments on interest rates here. And the Fed is wind down, QE, and market doesn't really seem to be bothered by it. Just give us your short term and your long term outlook for interest rates.
Right. So I think the Fed, the consensus is mid next year, 2015, they'll raise rates, but I still think there's enormous demand for high quality assets, and so the 10-year Treasury probably won't see much of a move up over the next year. We'll see. I think consensus is a little bit higher, but I still think there's huge demand for it. And I think the bigger question is, how much inflation is the economy going to get? Because that'll drive rates as much as anything. And we just haven't seen a lot of inflationary signals either in wage growth or, in anywhere really. So, and with oil prices moving down, that's a contrary trend to increased interest rates. So
Yeah, and
I think we'll just have another year of steady state.
Yeah,
So,
but in the gold market's kind of telling you, no, not to worry about inflation yet. I guess the only inflation is when you go to the grocery store and your grocery bill is higher and higher each time.
hmm
All right,
exactly.
Cate
Good.
Long, financial
Thanks, Joe.
blogger and founder of Puerto Rico Clearinghouse, joining us on Benzinga's pre-market prep, brought to you by Markify. Thanks, Kate. We'll speak to you again soon.
Great. Thanks. Bye.